Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to do a marker sketch for Sketchbook Sunday, and I'm working on marker paper, which I have drawn a square in the middle of my marker paper. That way my sketch will be about the same proportions as the reference photo I'm going from. And it was a photo of an astronaut in space, and I thought it was just kind of interesting and not something I would typically draw, so I decided, heck, why not? It would be kind of fun to do something different. I'm using a black col erase pencil to get in my just basic sketch here. Really, the other reason I wanted to draw that square before I started sketching was because I wanted to use the negative space or the space around the astronaut to be able to get my my proportions right, my shapes right, because it is such a unusual subject. You know, it's not something you see in real life, somebody in a spacesuit. So I needed to have that extra kind of tool at my disposal to be able to use the negative space. I'm using some really light warm gray marker here, and I'm using biennial markers. I'm using the classic ones that have a bullet and a chisel tip, but you can of course use whatever markers you like. There are so many affordable options on the market right now, and I'll list a few of my favorites in the video description, depending on whether you want a brush nib, brush nib and chisel nib, or a bullet nib and chisel nib, or if you want to have refillable options, which usually do cost a little bit more but save you money in the long run if you are if you're a heavy marker user. You know, there's a lot of different factors to consider when you're thinking about buying some markers, because something that's a good deal for one person might be wasteful for somebody else. So somebody that uses markers every day will definitely want a refillable version, versus somebody that only uses markers occasionally. Just getting a large pack of a variety of colors might be a better option for them, because it's unlikely they're going to run any dry. So you have to kind of take your own usage into account before you choose the markers that you want. I have a lot of markers. I love Copics just like everybody else, but I know that's an unrealistic purchase for a lot of people because they're expensive and you have to buy them per marker. So getting a large set to start off with lots of colors, I think is a pretty good investment. So I've been just kind of like basing in colors here. I'm putting the little flag on his spacesuit in just kind of the blue and red, because I'm going to be adding shading. I'm going to be glazing shadow over everything. Here you can see I'm starting to add in some darker values with a darker gray. Still a pretty light one though. On marker paper, another thing I want to let you know is that it's got a coating on it so that it doesn't soak up a lot of ink. So if you're looking to conserve your ink, consider purchasing a marker paper. It's pretty thin. It's got a coating on it that allows the ink to stay on the surface and allows you to work into it a little bit more. It keeps it from bleeding through the back. It's almost got like a waxed coating on the back of the paper, or a plastic coating on the back that doesn't allow it to seep through. And it's not for everybody. I like it for drawing. If I'm stamping, I prefer a cardstock just because I like to do some blending techniques and I like that thick, the thicker paper. But I plan on doing a video or a live stream on marker papers and just kind of pulling out all the marker papers that I have and comparing them and kind of answering questions and stuff. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and also just kind of keep an eye on my channel for when that video or live stream becomes available. So I've glazed on some shadows. I am also adding in that there was this kind of weird pack that the astronaut was holding on to. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's connected to him with both a strap and a cord, so I sketched those in. And something really neat about this picture was that you could see the earth behind him, so I wanted to get that in, and it's very, very bright. It's like one of the brightest things in the picture, so I wanted to get them in some pastel shades of green and blue, and you know, then use my colorless blender to kind of add some clouds, just kind of like lift some ink and add those lighter spots. I really think with markers, you just need to experiment. You need to put some time in. I think they have a steeper learning curve. And I will say if you have the chisel and bullet tip markers, they do have a steeper learning curve than the brush and chisel tip markers, because the brush markers are a little bit more intuitive. They're kind of like using a paintbrush. You can vary how much ink you're putting down by how hard you press, and you can work on the tip and get details, or you can work on the side of the marker and get wider swaths of color, and it puts out a lot of ink, so it's easier to blend. So I will say that brush tip markers do lessen that learning curve of markers, but if you're willing to put the time in, you know, you can get very similar results with your chisel tip markers. It's just a little bit more difficult, I think. And a lot of us, you know, when we got our first markers, there really wasn't that many brush tipped options. That was definitely an anomaly. Most designers had like the Prismacolor chisel bullet markers, and that's, you know, what we learned on. And so, you know, we were used to it. So kind of keep that in mind. If you have chisel markers, chisel bullet markers, and you're frustrated, just put the time in. It takes time. It takes time to learn. It takes time to learn with brush tip markers too. But, you know, it definitely takes a little bit more time to learn to use a chisel nibs. Prismacolors were some of my first markers, and I really liked them because of the chisel tip had so many interesting edges on it that you could use, and it was just kind of fun to use. Now, I will say that I see a lot of beginners not use the chisel tip enough, especially if they have a chisel and bullet tip version, because if you don't have the brush tip, you're going to want that chisel tip for laying down lots of ink, and when you have more ink down, it's easier to blend. So you'll see, since I'm using a chisel bullet set here, I am using that chisel tip a lot so that I can get my ink down, I can blend, I can fill in the color as quickly as I want. If I was like working with a small image like rubber stamping, I tend to use a bullet tip a lot more often to get in those tiny areas and to make sure I don't flood it with ink, because if I'm working on cardstock tends to feather more than marker paper, and the bullet tip doesn't put down so much ink, so you don't have that feathering issue. So, you know, that's, you know, you have different varieties, and you know, depending on what you like to color, you'll want to choose a different type of marker. Now we're getting towards the end of the drawing here, and I'm putting in the background. I'm using black. Sometimes you have to use a couple layers of black to get that solid density of color that you want. I find with a marker paper it's easier because the ink sits right on the top and you don't get as much blotchiness as you would on a cardstock and maybe need an additional layer. And by marker paper, I'm talking about the thinner, waxier marker papers versus the thicker, more cardstock-like mixed media style marker papers. Those might take a couple coats because they're more absorbent and they're thicker. But with these thinner ones, it's, you know, it doesn't take a ton of ink to finish up your picture. So I'm just filling in, just trying to be careful to go around the chords so I don't lose them. I don't cover them up because that black would be very difficult to lift if I needed to. And just kind of giving this atmosphere the final contrast that it needs. Once you get that black in there, it does start to look like the spaceman is floating in space. And I think it's just kind of an iconic look. It's fun. I really just had a lot of fun drawing this. And I think it's neat to just kind of step outside of your comfort zone and find a different subject matter. Now, I apologize if you're hearing any weird background noises. You know, hey, the kids are all home. There's construction going on. It's real life. And there might be some banging around. Who knows? There's always some sort of noises going on here. There were some shadows in that, whatever that thing that guy's holding on. I think it looks like some sort of like maybe machinery or tool that he uses to fix the outside of the spaceship. But I'm putting the shadows on there that I saw from the reference photo. I couldn't see tons and tons of detail, so I just had to kind of see what I could see. And I'm adding a few opaque details with some colored pencils and just to kind of give it a little bit more depth and highlight. So don't forget to use your colored pencils to really amp up your marker drawings, especially if you don't have a big selection of markers. Adding colored pencils or gel pens will really elevate the drawing and give you a lot more option. Like I can add those white clouds a little bit better than I could with the marker, and I can give that feathery kind of atmosphere at the edge of the earth there with my white and blue colored pencils just to kind of fuzz it a little bit, give it a softer focus. So use all the tools in your toolbox. This was so fun to draw. I hope you liked it. Please give me a thumbs up if you do. Until next time, happy crafting.